Hi, I'm Mary Jo Foley, the community magnet at Petri.com, and I have here today with me at Shift Happens, Tony Redmond.
Hello.
Hello, Tony.
Hi, Mary Jo.
Tony is a regular contributor to Petri.com, and he also is the editor of the Office 365 for IT Pros Bible.
Thank you.
So, Tony, I
Yeah.
think we should talk about Office 365.
That seems like a natural kind of progression.
It does. And you know, the thing I'm really interested in hearing from you is how you think Microsoft can continue to grow Office 365. I mean, they're already at 180 million users right now. How big can they get, and how big should they get?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I guess the couple of facts, because of course Microsoft doesn't tell the world how they grow.
Correct.
But if we look at the numbers that they give to the market, which they can't really lie too much about.
Right.
Okay. You can say that for the last 2 years or thereabouts, they've been growing at about 3.5 million seats a month.
Okay.
So that gives you a growth curve. They're at 180 million. They'll be at the end of this year maybe 200 million. So that's pretty good.
It is.
Now, you've got to put that into context of where do they get the growth.
Right.
So a couple of things. You've got the installed base for the various products. So you've got the installed base for Exchange, the installed base for SharePoint, the installed base for Skype for Business.
Right.
And then you've got new wins and all the rest of it. So just looking at the installed base for Exchange and SharePoint, who knows what those are, because Microsoft never published the numbers.
I've never seen numbers on that.
Never. Various market analysts have attempted to quantify those numbers over the years. I think the closest we ever heard, and this number could be way out, was 360 million odd for Exchange, maybe 250 million odd for SharePoint. So given that, that's a healthy base to grow into. And so there's still a bit of headroom there. You add on top there wins. They are winning in terms of Gmail and stuff like that now. And the migration for a whole pile of legacy systems. What's the total addressable market?
Right.
500 million maybe? Who knows? I mean, it's going to grow.
Well, and then there is the question of should they be wanting to grow as much as they're growing, because we've had some stability issues this year with Office 365, and that begs the question, are they able to accommodate the growth that they're seeing right now and trying to accelerate?
Well, I think the stability issues, you're always going to have problems.
Right.
Okay. And one of the things that Office 365 has got that is really quite good is the way they have segmented out their infrastructure.
Right.
I mean, if you look at those data center regions spread across the planet, Exchange Online is arrayed in a set of forests, each of which can stand on its own. So SharePoint Online is arrayed in a set of farms, each of which stands on its own. So there is a certain amount of robustness. What we've seen, though, in the last year, I think, is a number of very public failures in Azure.
Right.
Okay, and it's
all about DNS.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting one. But they've had MFA problems.
Right.
They've had Azure Active Directory problems, and all of those pieces of the ecosystem find their way into Office 365 because they impact users directly.
Right.
I also think that Microsoft has a quality problem at times.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I hear from people time after time after time, is that stuff just doesn't work. Our stuff works oddly. Our stuff doesn't work the way people think it should work. Or
when they patch it, obviously, then failed patches always come up.
And I think that speaks to the kind of environment that they're running. I mean, you've got this massive cloud environment. They're constantly rolling out software, new updates, patches, whatever, and they're rolling it out across all these data center regions, across these hundreds of thousands of servers. I mean, Exchange Online is now 175,000 mailbox servers. SharePoint, I think last month they said they're at 200,000 SharePoint servers. There's a massive number of servers, and so you can imagine the matrix of testing.
Right, I know.
It's just incredible.
It's crazy.
But I think you do see it bubble up from time to time. Some quality problems that people aren't quite so happy about.
Right. So let's switch gears a little. We just had recently the SharePoint conference in Las Vegas, and a big theme there was some of the UI refreshes that they're doing to SharePoint. In fact, they they prompted some articles out there on the internet about, is SharePoint sexy? And the whole idea comes up to me, does that even matter? Do users of Office 365 care all that much about what their apps look like? And will that actually fuel any growth, fixing up the UI of some of these things?
I think there's two aspects that we could talk about there. I think firstly, you've got the fact that the SharePoint community wants to see progress in SharePoint.
Right.
So seeing that they're getting new features released, I think that is important for them because it reinforces their loyalty, it reinforces their commitment, it reinforces SharePoint's role as the intranet for many tenants. So there's goodness there. Whether or not SharePoint is sexy, ooh, I thought that was
That's a big leap there.
That was an extreme leap. I've never really had those type of feelings about SharePoint myself.
No, I don't understand it really.
I don't. I mean, if there was any part of Office 365 that could have that particular name, I think that's probably Teams at the moment, because that's where an awful lot of the fuss and bother is. But let's face it, it was all marketing. It was, a matter of stoking up the fan base so that everybody felt good about themselves, felt good about SharePoint, and that's fine. That's what happens at conferences.
It is.
And
I mean, SharePoint is still a big part of the growth driver for Office 365, right?
I think so. I think right now what you're seeing is that a lot of the easy migrations are well past. They're in the rear view mirror.
Right.
And what you're seeing now is that people who have got SharePoint farms, particularly those that might be running older SharePoint farms, are saying, hey, it's time to transition to the cloud.
Right.
And it's so much easier to manage SharePoint in the cloud. I mean, SharePoint in the cloud, firstly, it's a very different beast. And secondly, it's much easier to manage. And what I mean about it being a different beast is that on-premises SharePoint is very much an ecosystem that stands and lives and dies by itself. I mean, think of the massive amount of ISV products that surround SharePoint on-premises. SharePoint in the cloud is not an ecosystem in itself. SharePoint in the cloud, SharePoint Online, is the document management provider for Office 365. So all of the apps that use SharePoint depend on it, but they depend on it as a service rather than saying, I've got to have this massive SharePoint infrastructure behind it. And in fact, I think a lot of the growth that we see now in SharePoint storage in the cloud is being driven by Teams and Office 365 groups and even Yammer that are now picking up SharePoint storage. And people don't even know about it. And then, of course, there's the influence of OneDrive for Business.
Yes.
Which is remarkably better over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things happening around SharePoint. A lot of it is goodness. Sometimes the functionality doesn't roll out as quickly as we'd like.
Yeah.
I mean, the modern, as they call it, SharePoint Administration Center, is a work that's been in progress for longer than people would like. But mostly it's good.
Yeah,
mostly it's good.
That's good. So kind of circling back to our original question and idea, do you think Teams is how Microsoft is counting on growing Office 365? If you had to kind of pick one thing that they're looking to really fuel the growth going forward, would it be Teams, or is it some product that has yet to be announced and maybe even developed?
So I don't think Teams is the growth engine for Office 365, and there's one very good reason for that. If you look at the Teams competitors like Slack, and you look at the total number of users that those folks have got, well, they're under 10 million.
Right.
Okay, so it's not a hell of a lot of growth there for Microsoft when you're talking about the overall figure for Office 365. Microsoft will grow Office 365 based on Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, Planner, the whole platform. What Teams does, though, is it gives people another reason to buy Office 365 because it's part of Office 365. In fact, one good way of understanding Teams is what a senior engineering manager at Microsoft said to me. He said, Teams is built on the shoulders of so many Office 365 applications. So, in fact, it is the epitome of integration of the software toolbox that Office 365 has become. It's got everything in there.
Right.
So Teams is another good reason. It's a very good reason to use Office 365, but it is by no means the growth engine or the only reason to use Office 365.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much to Tony
My
Redmond.
pleasure. My pleasure, as
And
always.
join us for more interviews here at Shift Happens.